During our divorce hearing, my wife walked in pregnant, smiling like she'd already won. She claimed it was mine, said I was trying to abandon my new family. The judge was about to speak, until I stood and said, "Your Honor, I've had a vasectomy since 2018. Her smile dropped. Her lawyer asked for a break. Now she's calling me 43 times a day. When our divorce hearing started, my wife strolled in pregnant, grinning like she'd already scored the win. She pointed at her stomach, saying the baby was mine, and accused me of trying to walk away from a new family. The judge was about to speak when I stood up and said, "Your Honor, I had a vasectomy back in 2018. Her grin fell flat right then. Her lawyer quickly asked for a recess. Now she's blowing up my phone, calling me over 40 times a day. Before I dive into the whole story, let me just say, I appreciate you being here more than you know. It really means the world. But take a second to look at this. Only about 8% of the folks watching are actually subscribed. If you enjoy these kinds of stories and want to keep them coming, hitting that button does more than you think. And yeah, I'm on a burner account and using fake names for obvious reasons. There's something downright strange about sitting in a courtroom and watching the person you once loved try to tear your life apart, all while wearing a smile. Even stranger when they're holding up an unborn child like it's a weapon. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's some background. My soon-to-be ex-wife, let's call her Melissa, and I had been married for 7 years. We met back in 2013, tied the knot in 2014, and at the beginning, life was good. Actually, it was more than good. It felt great. Both of us had solid careers, me working in software engineering, her in corporate marketing. We traveled, put work into fixing up a house together, and shared this big picture idea of what success looked like. Kids, though, were never part of that picture, or at least not for me. About 3 years in, things shifted. I'd been diagnosed with a genetic condition, one that carries a 50-50 chance of being passed down to a child. The disease eats away at nerves, usually hitting in mid-adulthood. I'd seen what it did to my dad. By 50, he was stuck in a wheelchair, robbed of the life he once had. I'm 36 now, already feeling the early signs, numbness in my hands and feet sometimes, balance slipping here and there. That's not something I could, in good conscience, risk giving to a kid. When I first got that diagnosis in early 2017, it hit me like a freight train. I sat in the neurologist's office holding those genetic test results while he explained what lay ahead. That night, I came home and told Melissa everything. I laid it all out. The prognosis, the fact it was hereditary, and how terrified I was of passing it on. Sitting across from her at the kitchen table, I held her hands and told her, "We've got options. We could adopt, we could foster, or maybe we just live child-free and focus on careers and travel." She squeezed my hands, tears in her eyes, and told me, "We'll figure it out together. Your health comes first." For almost a year after that, things were steady. We looked into adoption agencies, spent more time with nieces and nephews, and I really believed we were on the same page. Turns out, I was wrong. By March 2018, Melissa's tone shifted. She started making comments like, "Genetics aren't everything," or "Science is advancing so fast these days." Fertility clinic brochures started popping up around the house. Whenever I reminded her of my stance, she'd get upset. "You're stealing my chance at being a mom," she'd argue. I'll never forget one argument in our bedroom. She actually threw a fertility clinic brochure at me. "They can test embryos. There are ways to screen them," she yelled. I tried to stay calm and explained, "Those tests aren't 100% accurate. And even if they were, I don't want to gamble with a child's health. Why can't adoption still be on the table?" She crossed her arms and turned away. "It's not the same. I want to carry a baby. I want a child that's ours." That became the theme of the next few months, constant fighting. I'd walk in to find her glued to birthing videos or scrolling through baby furniture online. Anytime I reminded her of our talks, she'd either cry or blow up at me. Then came July 2018, the moment that completely flipped everything. I was digging through our shared laptop looking for a receipt when I stumbled on what she'd been up to. She had searched how to poke holes in condoms without leaving signs, kept a calendar tracking her cycle, and even made notes about skipping her birth control pills. My stomach dropped when I saw a forum she'd been posting on, asking strangers how to get pregnant when your husband doesn't want kids. One comment suggested getting me drunk so I wouldn't notice protection wasn't being used. The worst part? Melissa had actually replied, "That might work. He rarely remembers details when he drinks whiskey." I sat at that computer for hours, scrolling through weeks of her posts, feeling physically sick. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. This was her plotting to take away my choice, to trick me into being a father against my will. I couldn't wrap my head around it. The woman I married was willing to go that far. When she got home that evening, I confronted her. At first, She looked shocked I'd found out, but that quickly turned into excuses. "You're overreacting," she said, pacing the living room. "I was just venting online." "Venting?" I shot back. "You were actively planning to trap me into fatherhood." I was shaking with anger and disbelief. That's when she broke down, sobbing, collapsing on the couch. "I'm desperate," she cried. "I'll be 35 next year, and my biological clock is running out while you stall." "I'm not stalling," I told her. "I have a genetic disease. We've already talked about this." She wiped her tears and insisted. "Once a baby's here, you'll come around. You'd love our child no matter what. I just have to help you realize it." That night, I couldn't even look at her. I slept in the guest room, my mind racing. The next morning, I called my doctor and scheduled a vasectomy consultation. I didn't tell Melissa, not out of revenge, but because I knew I couldn't trust her anymore. I needed to protect myself from being forced into something I didn't want. By September 2017, while Melissa was away on a weekend trip with her sister, I had the procedure done. The doctor understood my situation and fully supported me, especially given the hereditary risk. I took a few days off work, told Melissa I had a project deadline, and recovered with some ice packs and mild soreness. I figured I'd tell her when she got back, and maybe suggest marriage counseling so we could deal with the massive divide between us. But the night she returned, she hit me with her own bombshell. Sitting at dinner, barely looking up from her plate, she said, "I think we should separate. I've already spoken to a divorce lawyer." I just sat there stunned. "That's it? No counseling? No trying to work through this?" "What's there to work through?" she said, her voice cold, rehearsed almost. "You won't give me children. I can't waste my fertile years waiting for a man who'll never change his mind." I never brought up the vasectomy at that point. It felt pointless since divorce was already on the table. Over the next few weeks, we hashed out the details, splitting assets, figuring out who was moving out. It was civil enough, but the air between us stayed tense. Then, out of nowhere, in November 2018, just a couple months after first saying she wanted a divorce, Melissa suddenly showed up at the little apartment I was renting. She had takeout from our favorite restaurant in her hands and tears in her eyes. We sat at my cramped kitchen table while she whispered, "I've been thinking, maybe I can live without kids if that's what it takes to save us. We built a life together, Ethan. I don't want to throw that away." I didn't fully trust it, but after 7 years, I wasn't ready to just toss everything aside either. We agreed to try counseling, and by December, I'd moved back into our house. For the next 10 months, things actually seemed to improve. We were in therapy every week, reconnecting both emotionally and physically. There were plenty of times I almost told her about the vasectomy, but I kept holding back. The longer I waited, the harder it got to bring up, especially while things between us seemed to finally be smoothing out. Then in September 2019, everything unraveled again. She was in the shower when her phone kept buzzing on the counter. Normally, I wouldn't snoop, but after the birth control stunt, I still had trust issues. I glanced at the screen and saw messages from Victor W. The preview made my stomach drop. "Miss you too, baby. Can't wait until." I knew exactly who that was. Victor Wilson, her boss. Against my better judgment, I opened the thread. What I read destroyed any remaining hope for our marriage. Not only were they having an affair, but the messages went back over 2 years, to early 2017. That meant it started before my diagnosis, before all our fights about children. I kept scrolling, piecing together the timeline. The affair ran straight through everything. Our arguments, her threats of divorce, even our so-called reconciliation. That reconciliation lined up perfectly with Victor being shipped off to London for a 9-month project. She'd basically benched me until he came back. When she walked out of the shower, I was sitting on the bed holding her phone. My voice was quiet but sharp. "How long have you been sleeping with Victor?" Her face drained of color. "Ethan, I can explain." 2 years, Melissa. 2 damn years. I could barely get the words out. "You were with him while making me feel like a monster for not wanting kids. You threatened divorce when I wouldn't give you a baby, then came back the second he left the country. Was any of it real?" She didn't even deny it. Instead, she tried justifying it, telling me Victor understood her desire for children, that he'd give her the family she wanted, that he appreciated her in ways I didn't. The next morning, I filed for divorce. October 2019. No second chances this time. From the very start, it turned ugly. She wanted the house, even though I'd covered most of the down payment with my grandmother's inheritance. She demanded half my retirement savings, plus alimony, even though she already had a solid career. Her lawyer painted me as this cold, selfish man, pointing to my refusal to have children as proof. 4 months in, February 2020, we had a hearing to sort out temporary financial arrangements while the divorce dragged on. I showed up early with my attorney, Daniel Turner, and we were going over documents in the hallway. You're in a strong position, Daniel assured me. The records clearly show your financial contributions. The judge is fair, strict, but fair. That's when I saw her walking down the hall toward us, and my jaw practically hit the floor. Melissa was pregnant. Not barely showing. Either. She looked at least 6 months along, her belly front and center in a snug dress I'd never seen before. She locked eyes with me as she came closer, hands cradling her stomach, wearing this smug, victorious smile. Daniel grabbed my arm. Did you know about this? No, I muttered, still staring. That's impossible. We haven't. Pull it together, Daniel whispered. Don't give her the reaction she's after. We stepped into the courtroom and took our seats at the respondent's table. My brain was in overdrive, running the math. If she was that far along, the dates didn't add up to me. Could she have been pregnant during our reconciliation and hidden it? That didn't make sense either. Then Judge Harriet Winters walked in, and everyone rose. After the formalities, Melissa's lawyer, a slick-looking guy named Lawson, was quick to speak. Your Honor, before we proceed, we'd like to amend our petition given new developments. He gestured toward Melissa. As you can see, Mrs. Collins is expecting. This significantly alters the financial considerations in this case. Judge Winters raised an eyebrow, glancing between Melissa and me, clearly clocking the pregnancy. I don't see any amendment in my files, Counselor. We'll be filing it this week, Lawson said smoothly. But given the advanced stage of Mrs. Collins's pregnancy and today's hearing, we felt it necessary to bring this to the court's attention right away. Melissa put on her best angelic act, hand resting protectively on her belly, her expression dripping with concern. Lawson's tone hardened. Mr. Collins has not only tried to cut off financial support to his wife, but now he's attempting to abandon his responsibility to their unborn child. It felt like I'd been hit in the gut. Daniel scribbled on his notepad in all caps, paternity test ASAP. The judge turned to me, her voice cooler now. Mr. Collins, were you aware of this pregnancy? Before I could even open my mouth, Lawson jumped in. Your Honor, he was aware. Mrs. Collins informed him during their last reconciliation attempt, which, we believe, is what prompted his sudden decision to file for divorce. That was a bold-faced lie. Daniel was on his feet objecting before I could even react, but Melissa's lawyer wasn't done piling it on. He claimed her pregnancy had caused medical complications, forcing her to cut her work hours, and that she'd been diagnosed with gestational hypertension. He pressed the point, insisting this made it even more critical that I provide support, painting me as some heartless husband abandoning his new family. Melissa sniffled into a tissue, playing the part of a fragile, expectant mother. In a soft voice just loud enough to echo through the courtroom, she said, I just want what's best for our baby. The judge let out a heavy sigh and looked at me with this thinly disguised contempt. Mr. Collins, given these circumstances, she started. That's when I stood up. Daniel tugged at my sleeve, but I shook him off. With all due respect, Your Honor, I said, steady as I could. I had a vasectomy back in August 2018. The entire courtroom went dead silent. Melissa's smug grin froze in place before crumbling right there in front of everyone. Her lawyer shot her a sharp look, clearly confused. I went on, pulling a folder out of my briefcase. I've got the medical records right here. I'd been carrying those documents since the divorce started, not because I predicted this exact mess, but because I wanted a full record of my health history. The file included my decision to get sterilized, along with 2 follow-up sperm tests confirming it worked. I'm not the father of that child, I said flatly. Melissa's lawyer scrambled to respond, his voice louder now. Your Honor, my client was never made aware of this procedure. This is a desperate attempt to dodge responsibility. Judge Winters held up her hand, cutting him off. Let me see those records. I handed them to the bailiff, who carried them to her. She read each page carefully as I explained. The vasectomy was performed by Dr. Grant at Mercy Medical Center on August 10, 2018. Here are the receipts and follow-up results. And here's documentation of my genetic condition, polycystic neuropathy, the same disease that claimed my father's life far too young. By then, Melissa was visibly shaking, her face pale as paper. Her lawyer bent to whisper something, but she jerked away from him. These appear to be in order, Judge Winters said finally. Then she turned to Melissa. Mrs. Collins, were you aware of this procedure? Melissa stood with one hand wrapped around her belly. He never told me. He couldn't have. We were still intimate after that date. The surgery doesn't affect intimacy, Your Honor, I explained quietly. It only prevents fertility. And yes, we were together during our reconciliation, but that was November 2018, 3 months after my vasectomy. Her lawyer immediately begged for a 15-minute recess, and the judge granted it. At the far end of the courtroom, the two of them argued fiercely. Daniel leaned toward me, shaking his head. A little warning would have been nice, he muttered. If you hadn't had those records, this could have gone sideways fast. I didn't know she'd stoop to this, I whispered back, still stunned. I never thought she'd try to pin another man's kid on me in front of a judge. Daniel gave me a pointed look. You know who the father is. He didn't even have to finish the thought. Victor. When court resumed, Melissa and her lawyer had clearly changed tactics. Lawson dropped the paternity claim and instead shifted the blame toward me. He argued that my secret medical procedure was its own form of marital misconduct, that I deceived her by not disclosing it. Your Honor, he said, dripping with self-righteousness. While my client may have been mistaken about paternity, the larger issue is Mr. Collins's deception. He underwent a life-changing procedure without informing his wife. Judge Winters wasn't buying it. She cut him off sharply. Counselor, your client just swore under oath that this child belongs to her husband. We've now established that's biologically impossible. I'd advise you to consider the implications of perjury before continuing. Then she addressed us both. Given these developments, today's hearing on asset allocation is postponed. Mr. Lawson, you have 48 hours to submit an amended petition that reflects the truth of your client's situation. Mr. Turner, you'll have 72 hours to respond. And Mrs. Collins, her voice turned icy. You would be wise to ensure all future filings are honest. Misleading this court about paternity can lead to sanctions. As I packed my briefcase, I caught Melissa staring holes into me, her eyes full of raw hatred. The sweet, wounded mother act had slipped completely away. All that was left was fury at how badly her plan had just imploded. Out in the hallway, she rushed toward me, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Ethan, please, let me explain. Her lawyer physically blocked her, steering her toward the exit while whispering something that made her stop fighting. That was only 3 days ago. Since then, my phone hasn't stopped buzzing. 43 calls from Melissa, dozens of texts swinging from tearful apologies to venom-filled accusations. 1 minute she's saying I tricked her by hiding the vasectomy. The next she's insisting the baby might somehow still be mine. And just this morning, she wrote that she'd made a huge mistake, but we could still fix things and be a family if I just talked to her. Meanwhile, Victor, the boss she'd been cheating with and the likely father, has completely disappeared. A mutual friend from their office told me he suddenly took a personal leave right after the courtroom fiasco and cleared his schedule for the whole month. By the next week, more drama hit. Melissa's lawyer officially withdrew from her case. Turns out he hadn't known about the pregnancy stunt and wanted nothing to do with her after being blindsided. She wasted no time hiring new counsel, a bulldog type with a reputation for being aggressive, though not nearly as respected in the legal world. My lawyer filed for an expedited divorce process based on the attempted fraud, which the judge granted. Instead of the year-long process we were expecting, we received a final hearing date just 6 weeks out. 2 days before that final hearing, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment, Melissa's sister Claire. We'd always gotten along well, and she'd stayed neutral during the initial separation. I owe you an apology, she said as she sat stiffly on my couch. Melissa told me you knew about the baby and were abandoning her. I believed her. What changed? I asked, offering her coffee, which she declined. She finally admitted everything to me yesterday. The affair with Victor, trying to trick you into having children during your marriage, deliberately getting pregnant by Victor while planning to pass the child off as yours for the divorce settlement. Claire shook her head, disgusted. She calculated that if the court thought the baby was yours, she'd secure much more favorable terms and ongoing support. And Victor? I asked. He wants nothing to do with her now. Apparently, he never wanted children either. One of the reasons she was having problems with both of you. When your lawyer sent his attorney the court transcripts. She trailed off. Let's just say he's not stepping up. I'm sorry she dragged you into this, I said and meant it. Claire had always been kind to me. I'm the one who's sorry, she replied. I should have seen who she really was sooner. The final divorce hearing was mercifully straightforward, except, with Melissa's deception exposed and documented, the judge was unsympathetic to her demands. She received no alimony, only her fair share of our joint assets acquired during the marriage. I kept the house, refinancing to remove her name and buying out her portion of the equity, my retirement accounts, and my grandmother's heirloom jewelry, she tried to claim. As we left the courtroom for the last time, Melissa, now heavily pregnant, attempted one final plea. Ethan, please, she said, catching my arm. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But this baby needs a father. I gently removed her hand. I'm sure Victor will come around once the paternity test confirms what everyone already knows. He won't, she whispered. He's relocated to the Singapore office. Then I'm sorry for your situation, but it's not my responsibility to fix it. I wish you and your child well, Melissa. But our chapter is closed. It's been 6 months since the divorce was finalized. I've heard through mutual friends that Melissa gave birth to a healthy baby boy and has moved back to her hometown to live with her parents. Victor apparently provides financial support, but remains in Singapore with no plans to return. As for me, I'm focusing on my health and future. I've started treatment for my condition with a specialist who's optimistic about new therapies that might slow the progression. I've kept the house, but renovated it extensively, removing all traces of my life with Melissa and making it fully accessible for when my symptoms eventually worsen. The most unexpected positive outcome has been connecting with a support group for people with my condition. Through them, I've met others who chose not to have biological children for the same reason I did. For the first time, I don't feel defensive about that choice, just at peace with it. Sometimes I think about how differently things might have turned out if Melissa and I had been honest with each other from the beginning. If I'd told her about the vasectomy immediately, if she'd been upfront about her unwillingness to consider alternatives to biological children, if she hadn't been carrying on an affair behind my back. But dwelling on what-ifs is pointless. The most valuable lesson from this whole experience is the importance of living authentically, even when it's difficult. No more hiding, no more compromising on fundamental values, no more relationships built on deception and manipulation. My life isn't perfect. My medical prognosis remains challenging, and some days the physical symptoms are frightening. But there's an overwhelming sense of rightness to my world now, a foundation of truth that was missing during those years of marriage. Sometimes the happiest ending isn't what you initially pictured for yourself. Sometimes it's just the quiet satisfaction of standing in your truth when it matters most, even if that means standing alone.